Happy Sunday and welcome to another episode of Small Town Expectations. It's going to sound a little bit different today. We're trying a little something new. You may have noticed in the last couple of episodes, the last two episodes I think, we did a little something different in the intro, and now we're changing it up a little bit more. And I would like for you to get used to hearing this voice because it's a voice that's going to happen every other week, of course, when we produce an episode. This is Haley. She is our producer. She's the producer, my producer, also my partner, and I adore everything about this woman. Do you want to say what's up?
Hello.
So here's one thing about Haley. She doesn't love being in front of the microphone. So we're going to try this and just kind of get used to it. And it's something that we both are really excited about. I'm excited just to have somebody else on the other side doing these intros because you may have heard in EJ's episode, also in Annette's episode, I did it a little different and I did the intro and then just started in the conversation as opposed to doing all of the craziness right there with the person sitting across from me because it gets a little awkward. And so we're changing it up. Let us know what you think of the changes. Also, don't forget to like and share and rate this podcast. So we've been doing some research and we learned that when you rate the podcast, that's when it moves up on the charts. Yeah. We have read a lot about that. And so really, it doesn't take very long. One extra thing you have to do, you have to log in, whatever that looks like for you. But if you rate it 5 stars, you can say anything. You can, talk about how much you love your puppies or how much you love the person that's on that particular episode. Whatever you want to say in the comments, that actually doesn't matter. It's more about the stars that you choose. It's all in the stars.
Give us your feedback. We would like to know which direction to take this podcast. We want to keep you guys interested and entertained because that's what the podcast is all about.
Right. And so now you're listening to Brandi and Haley on Small Town Expectations. Our guest today is somebody that we are really excited about. But first, Small Town Expectations is just a fun little podcast where we give everyone an opportunity to tell their story. And that could be anything. And so we want to invite you, if you are somebody who everybody has a story. I don't even want to say it like that. If you're somebody who is excited about what you've experienced, either living in a small town or growing up in a small town, please, please, please email us at Brandi Rose, BRANDI, ROSE9 at yahoo.com and just let me know that you're interested on being on an upcoming episode.
Yeah, we would love everybody whenever we approach them about being on the podcast, they freeze and they freak out and they think that they don't have anything to share with the world. But really, we're just interested in your perspective of what it's like to move to a small town or come from a small town and move to a city or just anything. We talked to one of Brandi's best friends this morning and he had that response. But then I was like, no, you could talk about all these amazing things that I've just learned about you today in our conversation. And it gave him that confidence to be on our podcast. So we're looking forward to that too.
And then he proceeded to tell some of the most hilarious stories of being in junior high. And I was like, that is perfect. And so hopefully he'll be on an upcoming episode. You should just harass him on Facebook and tell him that he should be on an upcoming an upcoming episode. And of course that's Chad Phillip. And I just really adore that guy. So, in the meantime, let's get into, first, you can follow me and this podcast on Facebook, on Instagram, on Twitter. I am Rad Brandi on all of those forums. And then, of course, don't forget, if you do want to be on the podcast, email brandirose9 at yahoo.com. And then if there's a person and they don't have Apple products or they don't have a way to listen on Apple iTunes, you can always refer people to the WordPress site, just the website really, and that's radbrandi.com. And that's just the perfect place for you to listen to all of the episodes, past, present, future, radbrandi.com.
Yep. And you can leave comments and such there too. So any feedback we welcome.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's get into this week's episode. This is a fun one, and this is kind of a perfect week for us to be introing Haley, in these intro in this intro session, because it is her best friend. It is the one, the only Cian Hazen, and this is such a great conversation that we have. Of course, I get a little emotional, but really, who's surprised at this point? But Cian talks about just his journey. He actually realizes now, as a 30-something-year-old man, that he is not a small-town guy anymore. That he is somebody who has experienced the small-town stuff and also the big town, big city life, and he actually prefers big city life. But he does reflect on his time in Farmington, and on his time in Raton, and just really shares a big piece of his heart with you. And I'm going to leave that up to your imagination, because it really is a cool story that he has. Cian has an amazing journey, and that's something that I got to learn a lot in preparing for this episode. I mean, he's your best friend, and he's just a good guy in general, but I actually one-on-one got to sit and talk to him, which is something that's never happened before.
Yeah.
So it was pretty neat.
Well, Cian's great, and we all know why he's great, but it's cool to hear a little bit of his backstory, and you can kind of understand that upbringing. And it's really cool to have someone in our area referencing things that we are familiar with.
Right.
Which is comforting in its own.
Yeah. So it's a good one. So take a listen. Here is Cian Hazen on Small Town Expectations.
Welcome to 1975, Austin Powers and Forja.
Excuse me while I change. The roller boogie has made me sweaty. Yeah, sweaty.
You see, Mr. Powers, I love gold. The look of it, the taste of it, the smell of it, the texture.
I love gold so much that I even lost my genitalia in an unfortunate smelting accident. Hence the name Gold Member.
Hey, Cian. I am so glad to have you on my show. This is something that has been going to happen for a very long time, and it is about time that it happens.
Absolutely. I'm very excited.
Cool. Me too. Yeah, I think a couple of days ago was the first time that you and I have actually ever had a conversation, just you and I. You know what I mean?
Yeah. There's always plus ones.
Yeah, and it was good. I feel like I learned, not only did I just like learn a lot from you just by asking some questions and figuring, really what you want your story to be about, but I just learned a lot about your personality, and it was something really special. That sounds so cheesy, but it's true. Like, it was kind of a cool moment. So I'm excited for this just because of that. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. It wasn't the pure shenanigans that is normally us.
Yeah, you guys aren't hitting each other. You guys were...
Private parts tag is a thing.
Yeah. So, I can't handle you guys in your private parts tag.
Hey, the game will play you even if you don't play the game.
Oh, I learned that the hard way. Cool. Well, Cian, let's just let the folks know a little bit just about who you are and where you grew up.
So my name's Cian Hazen. I grew up in Farmington, New Mexico. Graduated in 2005 from Piedra Vista High School.
Yeah, go Panthers.
Go Panthers. And I've lived in a bunch of small towns now. Grew up in Farmington, moved when I did a semester down at New Mexico State, and then I moved from Farmington to another small New Mexico town, even smaller than Farmington, on the northeast side of the state, Raton, New Mexico, and then made my way through another small town into Texas, and now I'm in a small town, or what I consider a small town of Midland, Texas, is where I live now. Yeah,
and I think that's weird, but it's kind of a common theme. I feel like for some folks that we grow up in a small town, and sometimes we just find ourselves going from small town to small town to small town. And you kind of learn something about yourself. And one of the things that you shared with me is that what you've realized is that really you're not really a small town person anymore. Tell people what that actually means for you.
So like I said, I went from Farmington to Raton, and then I lived in Raton for 5 years and moved to small town, like even smaller than Raton, which is only like 3,000 people, to Albert, Texas, which is northwest of DFW. I moved for a job, and then I only lived in that small town for about 6 months, and then I moved to Dallas. And that's when I started realizing that I'm just not a small town person anymore. The city life, the always having availability for things. There's always a 24-hour something close by. And I mean, Dallas still has it's not a huge 2 o'clock in the morning, everything's still open, but there's still quite a few things open and necessities, and you don't have to plan out absolutely every detail of your life, because there is something always open. And if you feel like going and doing something, you can probably find a place to go do that. And so just growing up in Farmington, and there was comfort in Farmington for sure. All my family was there, and it was a comfort. But now the larger cities are my comfort zone for sure.
And so I'm just curious. So how long did it take before you realized that that was something that you could adjust to and that you were really excited about?
When I first moved from Albert into Dallas, that it was definitely an eye opener of, whoa, I'm this small town boy in the big city. And for my job at the time, I was traveling a lot, so I still was having interactions with small towns. I helped cover one of our sites down in South Texas. I was traveling to Midland. I was still traveling back to, we had an office in southern Colorado, just 19 miles north of Raton, where I used to live. So I could go back and see friends and family in Raton and down in South Texas. And I was still getting small town things, but I was always going home to Dallas. And granted, that was only maybe 2 days of the week, if that. But that definitely was, I was still having small town interactions. And then just it's been 2 years now that I've been primarily stationed in Midland. And that's when I started realizing that I am very much a large town person. And it's not like I never come back to Dallas. My corporate headquarters is in Dallas, and so I go back for work quite a bit. And my husband lives in Dallas, and so I come back to Dallas as much as possible. And so I think really being stationed in Midland full time, having to have an apartment there and my day-to-day function there, is when I started realizing it's just not for me.
Yeah, and it's not even that really Midland is a small town, because it's really not. It's just about availability and culture, I think. I mean, would you agree with
Absolutely.
that?
Yes, it's very much different culture. And Midland's an interesting area because it's an oil-filled town. And so it's a transient population. And so, I mean, we have, just for my company, we have people from Florida and Northeast and all over Texas and California and Idaho and Utah. And these guys and ladies come work for 2 weeks, and then they go home. So it's very much a transient population. And so with that too is with the oil field and this flood of people into Midland, the infrastructure is not there for that high of a population. And there's money there because the oil field is a very money high industry, but the cost of living there is also exponentially more. And the infrastructure, the schools, you can't get teachers to come work there because the housing is too much. The cost of goods is more expensive. Pretty much you can guarantee going to the grocery store that for everything I can buy for say $5 in Dallas, I'm spending $6.50, $7 for that same item in Midland.
Yeah, and it's purely because the oil and gas industry. That's it.
Yeah, that's the only thing I can think of, because and $1 doesn't sound a lot for one item, but when you go grocery shopping and you have 50 things in your cart, you just spend an extra $50 when there's really no point to it in my eyes.
Yeah, no, that makes perfect sense right there. And also, like, your friends and your husband just recently moved to Dallas. Like, there's so many reasons for you to love that city even more.
Yes, very much so. And my husband's from Dallas. He's from the DFW area and has lived that large metropolitan population. And he came and tried living in Midland, and it just, for numerous reasons, it just didn't work out. I mean, I was traveling back to Dallas a lot, and so it was nice when he was in Dallas, wasn't living in Midland when I would travel back to Dallas, because he would be here in Dallas when I got here. But when I was traveling, when he was living in Midland, it was, I'm leaving him.
Yeah.
And he got a much better job offer here in Dallas, and he sings in the gay men's choir, and that is in Dallas. There's not a gay men's choir in Midland, as shocking as that may sound.
Yeah. We're going to talk about queer culture in Midland, because I think it's very interesting.
It is very, very interesting. There's one gay bar in the Midland, Odessa. So when I talk about Midland, I talk about the whole Midland, Odessa area.
Okay.
Except you don't really go to Odessa, because for the longest time it had the highest murder rate in all of the nation per capita. It was beating metropolitan cities. And so you just don't really go into Odessa.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. And yeah, there really is no gay culture.
Yeah, which is significant to where you grew up in Farmington and then moving to Raton for a while. And so tell us a little bit about growing up in Farmington.
So growing up in Farmington, I wasn't very social. I didn't get more social until high school, and really theater is what got me to come out of my shell, so to speak. I was always the weird little fat kid, and it just, I didn't have a bad childhood per se, but I didn't enjoy sports. I tried playing football in like the 3rd grade or something. It was elementary school, but I was already so big, according to the YAFL, which is the Young American Football League, that I was not allowed to touch the ball because I had too much of a size advantage over the other kids.
Is that a real rule? I feel like that's not fair.
Yeah, that legit. Like, even if there was a fumble, I wasn't allowed to go after it. And so I hated going to football practice, because I have to sit and run up and down a lot and not actually touch the ball.
Yeah, that's awful.
So I don't even think I got through the whole season of that. Soccer, I kind of enjoyed, just because they made me the goalie, because if you just look at sheer percentage of blocking the goal, I had more body percentage than the other children. So, and I didn't have to run. I was big for a reason. I liked food, and exercise wasn't high up on my list of priorities.
Right.
And so, but then getting into high school, I didn't do a lot. I was still the kind of the weird kid in freshman year, and then sophomore years when I started getting into theater, and then junior and senior year is really where, I met my best friend Haley. That's where me and Haley met, was theater, and I can't imagine my life without her, and I wouldn't really know you without Haley.
Yeah.
There's many things in my life that I think the small town definitely helped shape me, but good and bad. And Farmington, is very much an oil and gas field, and so I remember a lot of times you had two options graduating high school. Was you went to college or you worked in the oil and gas field. And I was always I'm not working in oil and gas, blah, blah, blah. And then life came full circle, and now I work for an oil and gas company.
Which is probably something that you never imagined happening, especially because you, really, you and Haley together are like the epitome of just that theater family in high school, you know? And I think that I look at y'all's friendship and there is something very unique and just really, really neat about y'all's friendship, and the way that you guys have supported each other through so many crazy moments. Y'all have some of the dumbest inside jokes.
Or the most amazing ones.
Yeah, I guess it's all relative. You know what I mean? No, I'm being facetious because really it's fun to sit back and watch you guys just go back and forth with movie quotes or go back and forth with your crazy stories or whatever it is. And I think that there's a lot of people who admire that friendship.
Yeah, I think so too. And I mean, for the longest time, like where Haley was, Cian was, and where Cian was, Haley was. In high school, we took the moniker Timon and Pumbaa on. We had a Pumbaa Productions there for a while of we were going to change the world and make videos and do all this, have a theater production company and all that. And she's really shaped my life, and I can't imagine my world without her.
Yeah.
And I think there's times that people sit and enjoy our witty banter back and forth, and there's also sometimes people look at us like, if y'all don't shut up or get out of here, like, we're not going to let you be here anymore.
Yeah. Well, and, your significant others are just like, all right, see you later. And
yeah.
Then you guys get to have your moment. And there's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah. And just as we get older, I feel like everyone goes through this too of, you don't see each other as much. Your lives get busy, especially living in 2 different states, 2 different time zones, 2 different industries. When I'm going to work at 6 o'clock in the morning, it's 5 o'clock there, and Haley didn't get home till 1 o'clock in the morning because she had some event in her space. So
right.
There's just not always the time, but every time we do get together, it's never. We just pick up right where we left off.
Yeah, and that's really cool. It's genuinely, I'm being for real. Like, it is something that I really admire is y'all's friendship and just how it has stood through so much stuff, And you're married now, and that's significant. Life changes when you get a spouse, and there's nothing wrong with that. And
Haley actually married us.
Yeah, which is that's really cool. I just think it's neat. It's also really special that your best friend got to officiate your wedding. That's cool.
Yeah, it's very cool. I'm very proud of that fact.
Yeah. So now that you are living in a bigger city, you kind of talk a little bit about being the chubby kid throughout high school and while you were a kid. What has it been like now? Because when folks see a picture of you, they're going to be like, he's not chubby. Like, this guy is super thin, and like, what happened? So, just share with the folks, like, kind of the difference between living in a small town, and that was who you were. You were Cian, you were the big dude. Everybody, all that I ever hear about you from, like, teachers that you had in elementary school is that you were legitimately, like, the sweetest kid ever. And you were funny. That's what I always hear from teachers. One in particular, shout out to Miss Eccles.
Shout out. I love her.
She loves you, man. I'm telling you. She tells some funny stories about you being in her class. But you're still that lovable, super kind dude, but you're not the chubby guy anymore. And so just tell people about that journey.
So yeah, I was the chubby kid. The funny thing is, I went back and our senior year of high school, you put all your kid pictures in the yearbook, and your parents put the quotes and all that. And so we were hunting through pictures of me as a child and different things, and we found a picture of me like in kindergarten, and I'm like this cute little skinny little kid, and then like my first or second grade picture, I'm like, and evidently I found food between those years.
Oh no.
And so I've always been a big kid for as long as I can remember. Yeah. And it was rough in a sense. Like there was the bullying and all that type of stuff, but I like to think it didn't affect me that much, but that's probably me just shutting down feelings, which I'm really good at. And so,
or coping.
Yeah, we'll go with coping. That sounds much better than just shutting down feelings. But so yeah, I was always the big kid. And then, I mean, even through high school, I was always a big kid, and it worked in theater pretty well. That I'm like, hey, I'm going to go move this platform by myself because I can. Mm-hmm. And then my family is always been big. Food's always been a very important feature of our lives. My grandparents on my dad's side, they own George and John's drive-in in Farmington for years and years. And that was a family identity. I mean, I still go back and see people, and they still talk about George and John's and well, when it was the drive-in. And so that was always part of me. And then I was traveling so much for work. I mean, flash forward years later, I was traveling a lot for work. And if anybody is basically a professional traveler, you know that good food isn't always around, and you've been training all day and you need to grab food at the airport. You're not getting a nice, healthy meal. You're getting fast food and going about your business. And so the weight started creeping on even more. And then there was one point that I was getting close to 500 pounds. And I remember sitting in a hotel room one night and just having this breakdown of like, if I hit 500 pounds, I'm either going to kill myself or I'm going to have weight loss surgery. And then like a month later, I was somewhere where there was even a scale big enough, and it hit 503. And I was like, well, I really don't want to kill myself. And so I started looking into weight loss surgery. And I actually had the duodenal switch, which not a lot of people know what that is, but it's basically, so I had the sleeve. So I have a much smaller stomach, but then they rearranged my intestines to where I only absorb about 20% of what I eat. And so I have to take a lot of vitamins to help with not absorbing all the nutrients and stuff. And then I get to eat high protein and high fat. So when people on a diet or watching what they're eating or eat with me, and I order a double bacon cheeseburger, and that's what I'm supposed to eat. And they're having their lame Caesar salad. And so that's kind of a perk, but I eat like every 2 hours. I always have a snack with me wherever I go. Mm-hmm. And it definitely changed who I am, because now there's people that have never known me big. I was actually teaching a class today in Brady, Texas, and none of those guys there had ever known me as Big Cian. And so it's getting less and less of me having to tell people, because other people have already told them. And so it's definitely been a part of my journey, and a very important part of my life. Because, I mean, hearing Miss Uckles talking about how I was the sweet little funny kid, I still like thinking that I'm that way a lot, but I've also developed more of an edge, and I don't know if it's because of age or because of weight loss or what it is, but I try being the good, kind, sweet person, but sometimes I have to catch myself and being like, that was probably a bad choice. Like, you should probably go have a conversation with this person, because you came off a lot rougher than you meant to.
Yeah. And it's a lot of just life experience, I think. And you figure it out, you know?
Yeah, and I think it's also more responsibility as you get older, all those different type of things. I mean, I'm a supervisor now, and that has its own realm of issues that come along with it. And I mean, I have a great team. My team is fantastic, and a bunch of go-getters. And I absolutely love being able to work with them. But there's also sometimes that I'm like, I loved being a trainer, and I knew I had control of my class on that day, and then I didn't have to worry about what was coming down the pipeline or anything like that. And so I definitely think part of the edge is just aging and more responsibility and learning who I am as an adult. Because if anybody, I mean, we're talking about Cian's and Haley shenanigans, like that's still a big part of my life. I wear a Batman hat to work every day.
Yeah.
I bought a car just because it was black and yellow. And so I call it the Batmobile.
Yeah.
So I definitely love that part of me, of the teenager shenanigans.
And I think that other folks love that too. I mean, I think that that's your identity. So now, your identity when you were in Farmington was that you were the big dude and you were goofy and all of those things. And now your identity has changed. I mean, you are in corporate America. You've had this big giant weight loss. You're not like the big guy. And so people definitely look at you differently. And you probably view the world a little bit differently now too. Not just because you're thin or because you're a boss or because you're a husband. I think it's a combination of all of those things, and you still are able to have fun and you're still able to be goofy, but you're also able to be a boss. And, and you mentioned it, you're able to know when you've crossed a line and you're mature enough to go, yeah, probably didn't handle that well. Let me just go kind of fix that, or apologize, and maybe not fix it, but really just go to a person and go, hey, like, I'm really sorry that wasn't okay. That's maturity.
Yeah. And going back to like viewing myself, like I still see myself as the fat guy. And so that's another thing in the background always too people see me now, like you just called me, I'm thin. And a lot of times I'm like, not thin.
Yeah.
But I know I am, does that make sense?
It's
still that mental thing of that was my identity for so long.
Yeah.
That's hard to cope with.
Yeah, sometimes the way we see ourselves, it's not the same as the way other people see us. And that can affect our day-to-day living. And so you have to be really careful, with that. And so, yeah.
Yeah, I definitely think that. And that ties directly into being a gay man in A, the oil field, B, corporate America. That there's still that guardedness, just because you don't know. I mean, my whole team knows. I've done team dinners with them, and I've brought Javi along. And I remember going to the company Christmas party. That was a big outing of myself, really. Of I'm taking my husband to this giant corporate party where it's everyone and maybe not everyone knows. And you catch yourself using the word spouse or partner or things like that when the first word that wants to come out of your mouth is your husband. I mean, that's what he is. And I want to show him that respect. But then there's that, I'm in this uber super straight, very conservative leaning demographic right now. What's the best thing I can say right now?
Yeah.
And that's a difficult thing that I was actually listening to another podcast on the drive, and they were talking about it a little bit, but just the passing. I try passing as a straight guy, and I'm not, you think of the horrible stereotypes of gay men, I fit pretty much none of them.
Right.
And so I pass as a straight male pretty easily, but there's also the duality of then everyone expects that, and that's not my identity.
Right. Well, and I'd like to add another layer to this. You live in Texas, which that's a whole nother layer to you feeling safe in all of the places that you find yourself.
Yes, and especially in West Texas. I think that's part of the draw to Dallas too, is me and my husband can go to dinner and I'm not worried of when I grab his hand to walk out to the car or we're walking down the street or anything like that. In West Texas, that's a very different environment and thought process that goes through your head of what's the safest for us right now. And I'm very protective. And so if it was just me, it's not a big deal. But if I grab Javi's hand and some crazy redneck wants to throw something at us or start a fight or gay bash us or whatever, like that would be when I could make the choice to not hold his hand. And in my head, that just stops the problem before it happens, which is a horrible thing in itself, that I have to stifle affection for my husband because of some other person, and they don't know, they have internalized homophobic thoughts or whatever the case may be.
Right.
So
so something that I talk to teenagers about a lot is you have to know when you're safe, and that's something that queer people really just have to always be aware of, is what is your safe space and when is it dangerous for you to hold your significant other's hand, your partner's hand. When is it safe for you to be affectionate? And that's it's a privilege. It's a privilege that cisgender straight people don't necessarily understand, and they oftentimes don't even recognize it. And that's purely what it is. It's privilege. And
it's pure entitlement. And on that same podcast I was listening to earlier, they were talking about just the effects, not only emotional effects, but physiological and health effects of having to keep all that stuff inside. They were talking about a study that was done in like 87, I think, that was, they looked at effects on the HIV male population, and men that were open about their sexuality, the HIV virus did not affect them nearly as much as the HIV men that were not out, because holding that stress and those secrets in them was having this huge detrimental effect on their health when their body was already fighting HIV.
Yeah.
And that carries on to just queer people's everyday life, because there's opportunities for outing yourself in anything you do that day, unless you live in the middle of the gayest place in the gayest neighborhood in all the world, and your job is not interacting with homophobic people,
right?
Then you're dealing with that on a nearly daily basis.
Right. And there are definitely towns and, cities and things like that people, people do have that advantage, but we don't necessarily, like you and I, we don't live in that place. And we don't have that. And I'm going to say that privilege. We don't have that privilege. And that was, for me, that was one of the things that when Haley came into my life, I was like, okay, here's a woman who has not been in the closet since she was, in her young 20s, I would say like 19 or 20, right? And now I'm going to force her to go into that place just so I can hang out with her. Like, that's not fair. And that was, Haley coming into my life was that time when I went, okay, like, this isn't going to be a secret anymore, because I can't do this to this person, and I really like her. And so, and it has affected personal relationships. It's affected work relationships in not in the job that I have now, but in other jobs. And it's just something that people don't know that it actually exists. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And it affects every avenue of your life.
Yeah.
Work, home, personal, religious. I mean, all of those different facets of your life are, and that's the craziest thing to me is, I mean, I identify as a gay male, but that is such a small portion of who I am.
Yeah, absolutely.
But it takes such a large portion of my energy a lot of times of figuring out where is my safe space, where can I show affection, who can I talk to about issues I'm having, or even just going into the office and somebody asks the innocuous question of what did you do this weekend?
Mm-hmm.
I went to Florida with my husband and his family. You know, that's a comment that has in my head would be fraught with a whole different aspect than just saying I went to Florida.
Right. Yeah, because now you're wondering, first of all, did this person know? Or is this person a religious person? Are they going to come at you with, all of that rhetoric? What comes next? And you're just like, am I ready to just exhaust myself with explaining that this is who I am, and it's okay that you don't like me because of it, but I don't want to talk to you anymore.
Yeah, exactly.
So you have found yourself in this oil and gas world, being an out gay man, and doing your best to be an out gay man in the spaces that you find yourself in. Something that I think is really significant to the company that you work with is they meet you and they see a lot of potential in you, and you move up the corporate ladder fairly quickly. And again, you're out, and they started, because of you, an LGBT resource group. Can you tell folks just a little bit about what that looks like in this very conservative, kind of more right-wing sort of industry? What does that look like?
Yes, I will say I don't think it was just because of me. I think it was in the works as well.
Good.
But when I did hear about it, I was like, I'm ready in my life to be a part of this. This is something I'm passionate about, and I want to be a part of this. So we started an LGBTQ resource group, and it's great. We have other we have other resource groups. We have a women's resource group, a multicultural resource group, a military resource group. So we have a lot of these groups, and we're still in the foundations of it right now. The biggest win thus far is we did these lunch and learns, and we actually brought in a speaker from one of the local universities in Dallas that, I mean, his whole job, I think it's a lot like yours. He just does it on the university campuses of, all right, this is the LGBTQ world. Mm-hmm. It's not just lesbians and gays. I mean, there's reclaiming the word queer. I mean, a lot of my workforce are older, and back in the day, calling someone queer was a horrible, horrible word to call them. And so we started these lunch and learns, and my company actually is sponsoring a couple of tables at the Black Tie Dinner. The Human Rights Campaign does a Black Tie Dinner in Dallas.
Ooh.
And, yeah. And so they, to sponsor a table is thousands and thousands of dollars, and my company is sponsoring 2 of them.
That's fantastic.
And it's so fantastic. And I mean, it is oil and gas. That's not what you think are going to happen. And I think it's fantastic. And working with our diversity and inclusion manager, she's been amazing in, she's just like, this is important, not just for, because I mean, it's a company, so you got to have a business reason for things, and one of the biggest ones of those is recruiting. I mean, kids getting out of high school now, or not high school, but college, they want to work for a company that are diverse and inclusive.
Right.
Even if they don't identify on the queer spectrum, they have friends that are, they have family that are, they're understanding that we're not social pariahs and all this. They want to work for a company that does that, and we want the best talent we can possibly get. Mm-hmm. And so that's a big part of it. But the other part of it too is just my company supporting its employees. And I mean, we're thousands, we number in the thousands of employees, and I guarantee there's more than just me as the lone gay of my company. And so they want to empower their employees to be proud of who they are, and also teaching the other employees of, look, this is the community, and these are your coworkers. Right. And I think that's why I love Milk so much. Is, I mean, his whole point was be out and be proud, because then you're showing these people that you've already created a relationship with, and they know you, and they know the type of person you are, that you are you're still the same person. Mm-hmm. You just so happen to identify on the queer spectrum.
Yeah. Yeah, that's something that's really special. And something that I always find is kind of this weird phenomena is that people know you and they loved you before they knew you were queer. And then once they learn that you're queer, they have to chew on that for a minute before they can decide if they're still going to love you and they're still going to care about you. And to be totally honest, not everybody decides that they're going to still love you after that. But a lot of times that's what it takes, is people like me or people like you or people like Milk, Harvey Milk, or whoever, just being like, okay, you liked me before you knew this about me. Now here I am. Super, super gay, super queer, super whatever. Do you still like me? And you get to decide. I don't decide that.
Exactly. And that's that. I wonder if we look in 100 years at our history, and it will be like, why was everyone so up in arms about this?
Yeah. I hope that's what it's like.
And I hope so too. And I also still striving for social justices is a very important thing. And something I always have to remind myself is baby steps have to happen.
Absolutely.
Again, I listened to a podcast for 5.5 hours today because I left my phones and took 2 extra hours to drive back to where I had just left.
Good old small towns.
Yeah, those small towns get you. But they were talking about, in the 80s in the military, of being gay was court-martial, just done. And then Don't Ask, Don't Tell went into effect. And that was, we look back at Don't Ask, Don't Tell and we're like, really? That's still pretty crazy.
Yeah.
But that had to happen to get to where we are now.
Yeah.
We couldn't have gone from, all right, court-martial if somebody thinks you're possibly gay, to be out, be proud, and you can still serve in the military. Mm-hmm. There had to be steps in there. And so that's what I always tell myself of the crazy political environment we are in now, of there has to be these incremental steps before you can get to the quote-unquote promised land.
Yeah. And sometimes, it goes a little backwards for a second, but
it does.
But people have to look to the future and be hopeful, because if we're not hopeful that it's not going to get better, then what are we doing?
Yeah, then we stop trying.
Yes. Then we stop trying. Absolutely. Yeah. Well, Cian, we have been talking for a very long time. And I hate cutting off this conversation because it's one of my very favorites. But good. I don't want to cut you off, especially, and leave you with wanting to say more or wanting to tell another story. And so if there is something else, please don't let me cut you off.
No, I really enjoyed having this conversation and loved doing it. And I'm very excited we got to do it.
Me too. Yeah. And, just for future sort of hopeful thinking, Cian's husband is going to be on the show eventually. Javi is just a unique soul all in his own. And
he's amazing.
I know. I adore Javi. And then, there's always the talks of having you on just so you and Haley can make weird jokes.
It will just be an hour of us quoting Austin Powers Goldmember from beginning to end with random private parts tag commentary.
Oh, can't wait.
It'll be amazing. It'll be your top-rated podcast. Everyone will love listening to that.
Yeah. No, but really, like, this has been, I really have really, how many times can I say really here? I've enjoyed just chatting with you and getting to know you on a different level. You know, we have had some queer conversations in the past, but nothing like this for sure. And I just think that's something there's so many things that are special about you. And that is one thing, is that you are Cian and you're this giant dude who gets to be an example. And even though sometimes you're trying to navigate whether or not you can call your husband your husband in that moment, or is he going to be your partner? People still look to you for direction, and they look to you for guidance, and sometimes just, you know, to make them laugh at something. And that's what makes you really, really cool.
Well, I thank you. And that means a lot to me. And I'm definitely glad that everybody in my life is in my life. And I definitely think starting out in a small town set me up in a way to be where I'm at now.
Yeah, for
Even
sure.
if I don't want a small town life anymore, I do cherish those experiences, and every experience I've ever had has shaped me into the person I am today.
Yeah. Good stuff, Cian. And officially, you got tears in my eyes. So it is time to say goodbye. It has been another episode of Small Town Expectations. Tune in again in a couple of weeks for another story.